Hey guys, welcome back to Shield Snipers. So today the card came in the mail is this PSA 10 Ellen Trammell. These don't pop up that much online. Um, the population is about 14 for PSA 10. Now the centering on this card is what caught my eye. Let's have a look at the card closely. The shield here looks pretty good. Not too much overstamping or understamping. The centering is dead on in the front, while the corners are pretty good shape. So the edges look good too. Now let's have a look at the back centering, which is slightly off actually, but it doesn't really bother me. I think it's still PSA 10 worthy. So yeah, so sometimes, I mean, I paid, this wasn't cheap at all, but sometimes a low pop Hall of Famer, they're going to get pretty pricey. And if you want a high end collection like me, keeping it within the more nines and tens over the eight, nines, and tens, but sometimes I'll buy an eight in certain situations, like I mentioned before. But if you're aiming at mainly nines and tens, this is something that you'll have to consider because sure you can get a nine. You can probably get a nine for about $150, or maybe two now, but 200. I mean, but if you really want a 10, first of all, there's only 14 of them, which they don't pop up a lot, but you're gonna have to pay a hefty premium for it. And this was a four-digit card. And of course, in the collecting world, four digits isn't a whole lot, but I think for a um, Desert Shield, I wouldn't call this. I mean, Alan Trammell was a Hall of Famer, a great player, but you know he's not the star caliber player like we see in Nolan Ryan or Ken Griffey, and so $1,000 for his PSA 10 isn't cheap. But anyways, so I'm very happy to add this to my collection because I don't know when's the next time that I'll find another PSA 10 that I can buy. So, but today I want to talk about a recent PSA scandal, and I'm just curious to how many people are going to stop using PSA. Okay, as a PSA collector myself, I don't think that's going to happen for me. I have too many PSA cards to. I mean, I think in order for me to stop using PSA, it's not only will I stop grading with them, but I'll have to kind of cross over all my PSA cards to SGC cards or Beckett, right? And I don't think I'll use any of the other grading companies. But there's a few reasons why I think I'll stay away from it. First, from an economical viewpoint, the value of my cards at the moment, PSA's cards are still more valuable than, let's say, a Beckett a 9.5 or an SGC 10. Okay, so for example, this is probably about half the price in the BGS 9.5, and I don't want to cross over you know and to devalue my cards. Now, the second issue is the cost of crossing over, which isn't cheap. And I have a very large collection, and if I have to cross over all my PSA cards to another grading company, that's something that not only I have to consider, but I probably can't afford. And I prefer to have to keep that money to buy other cards rather than to cross over. Now, the third thing I think that is making me a bit skeptical about whether or not people will stop using PSA, and all of a sudden all the PSA slabs will start to devalue or somewhat, is the fact that behind PSA there's a lot of money behind the company, and for another company that's you know other than SGC, let's just say, like Beckett or any other company, who cares? They need to have a substantial amount of money in order to take over PSA, or at least in the marketplace. And I just don't see that at the moment. And I mean, unless some big titan comes over and say, I'm going to start a new grading company with AI or whatever, with all this tech, and it's going to eliminate all the problems you have with PSA. And, I'm going to throw like $5 billion into this company, etc. I just don't see that happening at the moment. And I think, well, some of you may say, well, what if we go with SGC? Well, first of all, I think SGC is slowly adapting the ways of PSA for too. So if you're thinking by going with SGC, you'll avoid all the issues or all the problems that people mention about PSA grading. I think that slowly you'll find these problems kind of exist with SGC as well. And secondly, I think once again, a year ago when SGC was getting bought out by collectors, this kind of reminds me of the situation of what's going on now. Did most SGC collectors, or slab holders, I should say, did they cross over to PSA? I don't think so. And I think the issues is that, first of all, the reason why they have their cards in the SGC holder is because they believe in the SGC grading, or they prefer SGC grading. And if they prefer PSA in the beginning, they would have graded the cards with PSA or any other company. And the other thing is the cost factor. Like I mentioned, crossing over to PSA isn't cheap. And so if you have a large collection, like if you have 1 or 2 cards, that's fine. But if you have a large collection, like a few thousand cards in SG or in PSA slabs, and you're planning to cross over to SGC, that's a big chunk of money. And I think the overall the biggest kind of problem is that you're really crossing over to the same company now that they're owned by collectors. They're both owned by collectors, I should say. So yeah, so I don't really think that's going to happen. I think as a in general, as a collector, we should just hope for Nat Turner coming out and clear things up and just assuring collectors that, first of all, I think that PSA should just scrap this kind of buyback plan. It's just too conflicting for them to be the grader and also to be the buyer of cards. Now, the second thing is, as long as they can sort of be more transparent with how they grade, I would really like to see that. Like, for example, in some ways, they can kind of copy the ways of how Beckett's been grading, giving us more clear guideline to how certain cards got a certain grade, where they deducted grades and so forth. And that would give collectors more of an assurance. Now, apart from telling you what I think, I would love to hear what you guys think. Like, as a collector, and for many of you are probably PSA collectors, will you steer away from PSA in the future? Are you staying put like me? What's your thought on the situation? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you guys soon.